All right. Tired of long work weeks and constant stress. Economic stress is defined as the feeling of stress due to the current state of one's personal finances and or due to fear of the economy. Our next presenter is here to share how you can succeed in any economy by streamlining workflow, increasing profitability, and improving cash flow. Tom Grandy has over 50 years of experience in industry and small business. His company, Grandy Associates, does extensive business training for contractors through wholesalers, distributors, and manufacturers across the country, including many national franchises. In addition to speaking engagements, Tom also writes articles for numerous trade publications. Please help me in welcoming Tom.
You're right, there's a lot of stairs there. Thank you. Good morning. I'm told there's a clicker. Here it is. Good deal. I'm going to put that somewhere where I don't drop it. How about that? All right. All right. Very good. Well, good morning. I'm not used to being in places where you're not only on schedule, but you're ahead of schedule. That's unusual. That's a good thing. I don't know about you, but I'd kind of like to know where people are coming from who are going to be speaking with me. My name is Tom Grandy. I am the founder of Grandy Associates. We've been providing business training for contractors in all the different trades across the United States and Canada for the last 33 plus years. Rather than going into my background a little bit more, what I'm going to do actually as part of the presentation is give you a little more detail on where I'm coming from because it has purpose in terms of what we're talking about today. Technically, I'm an industrial engineer. I graduated from Virginia Tech way back in 1970. Worked in industry for a couple of years and then got involved in small business, probably 40, 45 years ago. Spent about 8.5 years working for an aluminum smelter as an industrial engineer and in the maintenance control department. It was the only non-union aluminum smelter in the world, and it had a no layoff policy. And guess what happened to me? I got laid off. And started looking around for another job, couldn't find anything. Wound up going to work for a microfilming company in Louisville, Kentucky. Was a full-time salesperson, traveling 100% commission. I hated travel, I hated commission, and I didn't want to be away from home. But it was the only thing open, and I had 3 little girls at that point in time, and it had been a year and a half since I'd had a job, so I said, I better take that one. So I did. I worked for probably the best salesperson I've ever run into in my entire life. He taught me how to approach people, how to do cold calls, things that I literally wouldn't have learned in any other way. And then guess what happened? He moved to Texas, the company went bankrupt, and the owner died. I said, guess I'm not going to work here anymore. So I will look around for something else to do. Wound up going to work for a fellow who had owned a siding and trim organization. He did siding and trim work on homes. He did some home insulation. And he called me one day, and he said, Tom, I've got this company. He said, I've been doing siding and trim work since I was about 8 years old. Now I'm 35. I got this significant size company. It's in the process of going out of business. Could you help me put a business plan together and see if there's any way to save this thing? So I said, well, sure, I'm not doing anything anyway. I'll do that. So I put it together and basically said, hey, Paul, if we could change this, this, and this, go into home insulation, and find somebody crazy enough to give you $100,000, it might work. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, if you can find somebody to give us $100,000, I'll hire you, and you can be the general manager. You run the company, and I'll run the crews. I said, okay. So I made a presentation to an area, what they call the Green River Area Development in our area. And basically, if you could prove you're going to increase employment, they'd loan you money. So I made my presentation that morning. That afternoon, they handed me $100,000. I said, gee, Paul, I guess we're in business. I'd never been in small business in my life. Next 3.5 years, I got baptized in fire. I mean, I did some things right, I did some things wrong, but I found out, this is really fun. I enjoy small business. So you can see the results of what you do. So it was a lot of fun. And then while I was with him, we became part of the national franchise called the Dial One franchise. And they would come to any major city and they'd get one HVAC, one plumbing, one electrical. They'd get all 40 different trades and you'd market together. And we became part of that franchise, and that exposed me to the different trades. And I was working for them with Paul, and eventually left him and went to work for the franchise itself, because the guy who owned a 6-state region of it lived in our town, everything from Kentucky, where I lived, all the way through Florida. And I wound up going to work for the franchise, and I worked as the regional director of company development, which meant I helped develop business practices for the different franchisees' office. The only problem was, guess what? Their idea of business training was basically sales and marketing. And I kept watching these small companies come in, and they'd plug them into the marketing program, and they'd double and triple in size and go out of business. And I said, this doesn't make sense. And then I did a little research and found out what the rest of the world already knew, and that is good 90-95% of the owners of the entire trades industry used to be a technician working for somebody else. And they're really, really good at what they do, but they're kind of weak on the business side of it, and we weren't teaching them that. So I said, well, gee, with that kind of a background, how about if I develop a program where the first thing that happens when we bring a new company in, we'll find out what's making money, what's not making money, we'll put a budget together, and then we'll hook them into the marketing program and go from there. And they said, well, that's a really good idea. Well, I got about halfway through developing that program, and guess what happened? They eliminated the whole regional level at Dial One, which I was part of. I was out of business again, out of work. And I had a friend of mine who was, I call the entrepreneur of entrepreneurs. If you went out to lunch with him, he'd have 3 ideas, and they'd all work if you just spent your time, energy, and money at them. His name was Spalding. So I went out to lunch with Spalding one day and said, Spalding, what am I going to do? He said, well, you started this program developing, why don't you put it into a full-day seminar? And he said, once you get a thing done, you can market it through Dial One because you got some contacts there, and then go out from that direction. He said, the best part is you won't get fired again. I said, well, my wife would like that. So anyway, that's what I did. Spent the next couple months putting it together. We founded a company called Grandy Associates, and that was 33 years ago, and that's how we're doing what we're doing. Now, what's the point of that whole thing? The point of the whole thing is, in the middle of that whole process, nothing made sense. I was doing this, but I was learning something. I was doing this, but I was learning something. I didn't even know it until I got to the end point that said, you know what? That was a perfect training program. I was just unaware of what was going on. Okay? So don't just discount where you are. It all has a path to take you to a certain place. Now, do not be distracted by the economy, the stock market, or your competition. Okay? Now, it's really hard not to be distracted by the stock market if you gain money in there right now. I mean, 1,000 points up, 1,000 points down. But keep focused in the middle of the process, okay? Keep in mind that even if 30% unemployment were to occur, 70% of the people are still working. And they're going to buy from somebody. And if you're the best guy in town, guess what? They're going to buy from you. Now, right now, we're at 96, 97% unemployment or employment across this country. So things are good. But think outside the box in the middle of that whole process. Look for new opportunities. In 2008, some of you were in business. How many were in business in 2008? Congratulations, you're still in business today, so you got through that process. That was a tough year. A lot of companies went out of business that year. At that point in time, I was working out of a 600-room hotel right on the river in Owensboro, Kentucky. One Friday, the owner of the hotel walked into my office and said, we're going to close the hotel. And I've been there for 21 years. So we're going to close the hotel. And I said, really? When? He said, tomorrow. I said, you're kidding. I mean, you got guests here. We're closing tomorrow. Oh, really? And all your businesses, you need to get out within the next couple of weeks. Oh, really? Okay. Seemingly disaster. So you start looking around and you say, gee, what do I do? I mean, I need a place to put my office. Well, I started looking around all over town. Again, to make a long story short, wound up with an office brand new, about 1.5 blocks from my house. I can now walk to work every day. But what seemed like a disaster in the middle of it was really an opportunity to do something else. Okay? Look for what's not obvious. Okay? This is one of my favorite little cartoons. I don't know if you can read it up there, but it's you can see the big guy up here. He's a little bit overweight. Said, well, shoot. I just can't figure it out. This is the owner talking. I'm moving 500 donuts a day, and I can barely squeak by. Okay? Never overlook the obvious in terms of where you are when things are slow. When things are slow, or even if they're not slow, put systems into place. What do I mean by that? Document everything in your company, every position, everything that you do, from answering the telephone. I mean, even simple thing like that. Document it. Who answers the phone? Script what you want them to say, what questions you want to ask, who puts that information into the customer base. Everything you do in your company, document it. And when you document it, put it in a big 3-ring notebook until you feel fairly comfortable that everything is running pretty well. All the documentation is there. And that's when the fun begins. That's when you go and you take a vacation. And you literally go away for a week, don't answer the telephone, and guess what's going to happen when you get back? Gee, we didn't know how to do this. We didn't know how to, well, update your manual a little bit. Okay? A few months later, take another vacation. 6 months later, take 2 weeks of vacation. And get to the point where your company can literally run without you being there. And then you have a sustainable company, and then you have a company that you can actually sell to somebody else. And we actually do that within our organization. I sold the company to a guy by the name of Bill Kennard several years ago. And Bill has taken it to the next level. And he informed all the staff in January. He said, in May, I'm going to be gone for 2 full weeks. He said, all the documentation needs to be done now. Figure out what's going on, because I'm not turning my cell phone on. We're going to see what happens. Okay? And then over a period of time, he'll get to a point where the company can run without him being there, even though he gives a direction. Okay? So put in the systems and test it. Okay? Keep in mind, customer today, I don't care what trade you're in, I don't care what business you're in, customer today wants 3 things and 3 things only. Number 1, quality work. Number 2, you do what you said you were going to do. You've described the repair, you've described the furniture, you've described the custom work you're going to do, you've told them what you're going to do, okay? Do what you said you were going to do. And thirdly, and most importantly, do it when you said you were going to do it, okay? I can absolutely promise you, in your business and every other business out there today, if you do quality work, you do what you said you were going to do, when you said you were going to do it, you'll have more work than you can handle. Literally have more work than you can handle. Okay? Those 3 simple things. Now, technology is great. It's helping us become much more efficient at what we do. We just went through a bunch of that a few minutes ago. But the bottom line is, customer wants quality work. Do what you said you were going to do, when you said you were going to do it. Now I want to talk for a little bit about a guy by the name Roger the plumber. Yes, he's a plumber. He's not building cabinets. I understand that. Principles are identical, okay? I want to share a little story with him because there's lots of things to learn from what Roger Peugeot went through. He's in Kansas City, Kansas. Back in 1995, that was a few years ago, Roger was the typical plumber. He did repair work, he did new construction work, and he did some renovation work. And he worked really hard and basically wasn't making a whole lot of money. And he kind of looked around one day and he said, you know what? We're not going to do all this. He said, I'm going to create a brand new company. He didn't even tell anybody within his organization. He said, I'm going to create a brand new company. He looked at the 3 things he did and he said, the most potential for my particular company is service. There's the highest profit margin, better opportunities. So I'm going to design a brand new company, create a business plan for it, to run it the way I'd like it to run. And after I put all my economics together, I don't care what it costs me to do business, I'm going to charge whatever I have to charge in order to cover that cost and make a reasonable profit. So he began to address the issues within his company currently. First thing he had was high employee turnover. He said, in my new company, my new service company, he said, I want my average employee to make $50,000 to $75,000 a year. I want to pay all their insurances. I want to pay all the benefit programs. He said, if I have that kind of a pay and benefit program, I will not only find the best people in the area, but I'll retain the best people in the area. So he said, that's the first key in my new company. Next thing, he said, we got rotten-looking trucks. He said, we got some old beat-up trucks out there. We got some pickup trucks. We got some vans. He said, in my brand new company, he said, we're going to have only the great big box fans, huge box fans like you all use. Okay? So I want them for 2 different reasons. One, I want them fully stocked with every part on there, because if I'm going to pay these guys this much, I don't want to run them back and forth to the office. And the other is it's a moving billboard at all times. So he built the cost in those new vehicles into his new company. Next thing he said, we're poorly trained in customer service. So he doesn't just teach customer service every few months or have somebody come in. He has weekly training on customer service, because he knows that's the key in terms of the growth within his company. Next thing he did, he said, he said, we can't give an immediate response to the customer. Now, in his particular industry, service in a timely manner is key. Customer calls up with a leak on their faucet or something like that. They don't want to wait 3 days for somebody to come out there. They need help, right? So in his new company, what he did is he built in an extra truck, an extra technician, 100% non-billable, just literally sitting there in terms of his model. But he said, if I build that into my pricing, then when the customer wants something, guess what? I can go out there immediately. I can give instant service. And he built that cost into his organization, his new organization. And he said, we got some customer complaints. And he said, how are we going to handle that? He didn't get a lot, but he got some. And he created a whole program called 100% customer satisfaction. And what he did is he took 3% of his gross sales, and let's just say he did $1 million a year. That's $30,000. He took $30,000, built it in his overhead, made it part of his hourly rate, so it was part of his pricing. And then if there was a complaint with a customer from whatever reason, guess what? He could take care of it. He could waive the whole bill if he wanted to, because that extra money was built into his pricing to begin with. Okay? In addition to that, he said, I'm not making a decent profit right now. He said, if I'm going to work as hard as I'm going to work and develop this brand new company the way it's going to be developed, I want to make a decent profit margin. He said, I want to make this much profit when it's all said and done. Okay? And lastly, he said, I need a way for my employees to have a vested interest in their job. Now, people should work hard all the time. That's the American ethic, but guess what? It doesn't happen. So he said, I'm going to build in a program like this. And he said, I'm going to pay all my technicians minimum wage. That gets me through all the wage and hour paperwork and everything that has to be taken care of. And he said the rest of it's going to be, their income is going to be based on a percentage of the work that they do. So the more things they do, the more work they have, the more they sell out in the field, the more money they'll make, and they'll be directly tied to productivity. When he went through this whole process and developed his company back in 1995 before he started it, then he calculated what his hourly rate needed to be. Now, this is back in 1995 when the typical hourly rate in that trade was about $65 an hour. When he was through, you know what his hourly rate came out to? $195 an hour. Now, there's a thing in the trades industry called flat rate pricing. You may or may not be familiar with it. It's like the auto industry. You just pay a certain price for repair. You don't know what the hourly rate is behind it. And that's what he did. He went to flat rate pricing and priced it at $195 an hour. And you know what? He made money because he provided quality work. He did what he said he was going to do when he said he was going to do it. He had good customer satisfaction in the middle of that whole process, and the company has grown and grown and grown since then. Okay? Now, there's several things I want us to learn from Roger because they apply to your industry as well. Number one, proper pricing is foundational when it comes to making a profit. You can do everything perfectly. You can have the best quality furniture or cabinets that are made in the country out there. But if you're not priced properly, you're going to go out of business. Okay? It does no good in his case to say I want to charge $125 an hour because everybody else does in town if you need $147 to stay in business. Okay? Find out what you need to charge and charge it. Don't be afraid to. We'll talk about that towards the end here. Second thing we learned from Roger is this. Price is not the determining factor. Price is not the determining factor. Again, if you do quality work, you do what you said you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. Now, I did a 2-day company overview. We do a lot of those in our business right now with a cabinet company in California just a couple of months ago. The company had been in business for 30 years. They did custom cabinets for high-end homes. Their typical job in a high-owned customer home, customized home, was $75,000 to $100,000 just for the cabinets. Okay? And I was sitting there with the owner and the team. We were putting the numbers together to find out what they needed to be charging. And his salesperson came in, one of his salesperson came in. We got talking a little bit. And it was really, really interesting because it highlights this point right here. He started telling a story. He said, we've got a general contractor that we've worked with for many, many, many years. Now, this company had top quality work, but their real asset was they did things on time, and if there was ever a complaint, they were on it that day. They took care of it. I mean, there was no question about it. They have built a reputation in that area of high quality work. He said, I went to the general contractor a few weeks ago, gave him a bid on a house. He said, my bid was $75,000. He called me in a couple days ago. He said, we really like working with you, and we have over the years. I know you do great quality work, but $75,000 is a little bit high for this thing. Could you just lower it to maybe $70,000? Salesperson said, no. He said, I'll tell you what, if you'll lower it just $3,000, I'll give you the job today. Salesperson said, no, can't do that. I said, we've run the numbers. We know what we have to do. Our price is $75,000, and he left the office. This real story. He said the general contractor called him the next day. He said, you got the job. Okay? You got the job. Not because of the price, because he did quality work. They did what they said we were going to do, when they said they were going to do it, and they took care of every problem that popped up immediately. Okay? Price is not the issue. Price is not the issue. If you do those three things regularly, it won't be in the top 10 consideration. That doesn't mean there aren't price shoppers out there. I'm not saying they're not there, but they are. But in general, if you price right and charge what you need to charge and do quality work, that won't be an issue. This is something else interesting we learned from Roger. Okay? Happy customers create referrals. Okay? Now, we work with all the different trades, as I mentioned to you earlier. One of the trades, believe it or not, we do a lot of work in is the chimney sweep industry. Now, I know your idea of a chimney sweep is a guy with an old brush and a beat-up truck and a couple of half teeth out in front of his face. And there's some out there like that. There's also some multi-million-dollar companies out there today. Now, Bob, so they call him Sooty Bob. His name was Bob. He used to be a chimney sweep, and he wasn't in the business too long before he realized there was more money to be made as a distributor in that industry than there was as being a chimney sweep. So he started a company called Copperfield Chimney Supply, which he started and sold about 5 years ago for $35 million. Okay? But one of the things he did every single week, he would send out these little notes called business building tips to his entire customer base. And this is one that just really, really caught my eye. What it said was this: make a test. Next time a friend or an acquaintance raves about a local business, ask them what they liked. 9 times out of 10, the answer will be their employees were so nice. Okay? And even if you ask them, hey, well, I'm glad the product or service was received well, but, what about the quality work? Quality work was good, but those guys were so nice. Okay? The customer's perception of your company is in the relationship they have with those who install the cabinets, those who are out there working with them. Okay? That's the perception of who you are. That's what people make their decisions on in terms of who they're going to work with to a certain extent. That's why I tell companies all over all the different trades we work with, when it comes to hiring people, hire for attitude, train for service. Hire for attitude, train for service. You can teach people how to do things if they've got some ability. Okay? But attitude, that's one of those things they either have or don't have, usually from about this high up. And that's hard to train, that's hard to change. What I suggest is, and you think about it yourself, I have lots of contractors doing this across the country. They just take business cards with them everywhere they go. And if they run into an individual that's got an outstanding attitude, that could be McDonald's, that could be the tire store, that could be Walmart, that could be a retail store, it doesn't matter where they are. I mean, you've seen them. You've gone in and you say, this person's different. Okay? You find somebody like that, they literally hand them a business card, and they said, hey, if you ever decide to change industries, give me a call. And I've had contractors tell me they get calls 6 months, 2 years later from an individual like that they met. Said, hey, were you serious about possibly wanting to hire me? And I said, well, come on down, let's talk. Okay? It's a continuous process. My wife and I have this little game when we go into a fast food place. Every once in a while, you run into somebody behind the counter that just has an outstanding attitude. I mean, they glow compared to everybody else. And we'll sit down with our food and we'll look at each other and we'll say the same thing every time. You know what? Next time we come in, that person won't be here anymore. because somebody's going to recognize their attitude and they're going to hire them. Okay? And most of the time, that's true. Okay? What else can we learn from Roger? Top techs are attracted to companies that pay well with above average wages and benefits. Okay? We used to sell a product called Profit Max. We don't sell it anymore, but it measured productivity out in the field. Okay? And what we found out was when we measured productivity in the field and we paid technicians based on that productivity, if they heard certain goals, okay, guess what? They earned a bonus. And guess what? They began to tell their friends about it because technicians like to be measured in terms of their productivity, and they like to be rewarded for having done a good job. And when they do that, they tell their friends about it, and guess what? I want to work for a company like that as well. Makes a difference. Something else Roger taught us that investing in customer service paid huge dividends. This is a little thing that a couple of companies I work with do that's kind of interesting. In the back of their shop, they have a great big dartboard like you see up on the screen. And they do two things at the same time. They put the dartboard back there. They have some darts and encourage the employees just to throw darts on their break time and before work. And at the same time, they institute what we call an attaboy system. An attaboy system is when an employee exceeds your expectations for whatever reason. Could be something they did within the shop, could be something they did with a customer, but they exceeded your expectations in some way, and they're recorded. So after they started that program, they didn't tell the guys what was going on. After a couple of weeks, and actually their first meeting about a month later, they brought everybody in for their normal weekly meeting, and they said, hey, you know, we've been doing this attaboy thing for a while. We've had this dartboard in the backyard, or back in the shop. This is what's been going on. We've been tracking your attaboys, things where you've exceeded our expectations. Now what we're going to do, if you've got 5 attaboys, we're going to let you throw 5 darts. And whatever you hit on that board, we're going to give it to you in cash. So they did. Had the first guy up there, and he brought him over to the side. And he said, here's your 5 darts. Throw them out there. Hit one, boom, $15. Now the boss is up there, the supervisor's up there, and he literally gives them cash. Okay? Now he explains ahead of time, I'm going to give you cash today, but at the end of the next pay period, that's going to show up on your check. We've got to pay taxes out because that's the way things work. But today you get cash. Okay? We had one employee come in there. He got 4 attaboys. He threw the first 2. And then he stopped for a moment. He said, you know why I got so many attaboys last month? And he said, no, why? He said, it's because Susie up in the office. We've been working, she's a customer service rep. She's been working with me really well. Would it be okay if Susie threw the last 2 darts? And all the guys are saying, yeah, bring Susie in. So they bring Susie in, they explain what's going on. She's just nervous as she can be. They hand her the 2 darts. So go ahead and throw a dart up there, Susie. She goes, boom! Guess what happened? She missed the board completely. But the next one, she hit a 20, and she got $20, and the guys are going crazy. But now what's happening? Throughout their day, wherever they are, in shop, out of shop, they're always looking for ways to exceed expectations. And when they do that, they're going to have fun at the end of the month and make a little cash as well. Just a little tip that sometimes helps. Okay? He also taught us that 100% customer satisfaction is possible, but the dollars have to be built into your pricing. So again, take that 1%, 2%, or 3%, build it in your overhead just like rent, utilities, all the other things that you have for cost of doing business. So it's part of your hourly rate, so you've got the flexibility to do something about that if there's a problem. Reminder, don't lose a customer over a $75 service call or having to go back and do something, okay? Think about the long-term cash flow from that customer. Okay? Now, I have a wife and 3 daughters. Guess what their hobby is? Shopping. And they're good at it. I mean, they invest huge amounts of time, money, and energy in it, okay? Now, my 3 daughters are now grown, and they're somewhere else, and my wife winds up buying all the kids, 11 grandkids, all their stuff, okay? But every once in a while, my wife will come back from a store. She said, I tried to take this dress back that I bought a few days ago, and I fussed and argued with that manager, and he wouldn't take it back. And she said, when I left that store, I told myself I'm never going in there again. Well, if that manager had any idea the cash flow he just cut off, he'd have given her a dress back, a $25 gift certificate, and take her out to lunch, okay? So what I'm saying is don't bite your nose for what's going on, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you ever fire a customer or have to say no. Sometimes you do, but be a little flexible in there. Don't be so stubborn that you lose the cash flow behind that. Okay? Creating a win-win pay system creates happy customers and increased profits. Few employees are going to do their very best unless they have some incentive to do so. What I'm saying is tie performance into your pay system in some form. We all have different types of business, different people within your businesses. Somehow tie performance into productivity and the pay system as well. So I've got a vested interest in doing a great job. Okay? Makes sense. What else we learned from Roger? It's possible to make a very nice living in the cabinet company industry. Okay? It's a nice opportunity throughout the whole trades industry to make a good living. The problem in a lot of industries, in a lot of cases, is this. The thinking is, gee, my granddad never made more than $25,000 a year. My dad never made more than $25,000. I'm not worth more than $25,000 a year. Well, you know what? You are. You're providing a valuable service that nobody else provides in the way that you provide it, and in doing so, you deserve to make a decent living in that process. And take that salary and build it into your overhead just like rent, just like utilities, so it's part of your cost of doing business. Because if you don't build rent into your rates, guess what? Rent doesn't get covered. If you don't build your salary into that, you don't get covered either. So make sure it's in there. Now let's talk about a few things that you can brainstorm with your entire company. Okay. Number one, discuss showing up on time, both at work and at the customer's home when you're doing the installation and that sort of thing. How to properly communicate with customers. Remember we said earlier, quality work, do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. Okay? Talk about how important it is to show up on time. Hit the customer's expectations. Exceed them whenever possible. Think about what your guys look like. I mean, which guy would you rather have show up at your house? Okay? Superman over here or Mr. Fuzzy Feeling on the left. Okay? It's good to have decent looking employees when they're out there installing the cabinets, when they're out there doing the work. Okay? Talk about how to address the customer properly. If you're going to a customer's home, talk about the fact that you knock on the door, take 3 steps back so you're not threatening the customer, have a business card with their name on it and their picture hopefully, and hand it to the customer so they can introduce themselves. Okay? Not only have cards, wear uniforms. Now, I know that's not always the case that you want to do, but again, it identifies them as somebody in your company. Wearing booties into the customer's home. You talk about making a difference. Customers looking at that and say, you don't have to put those on. I mean, it's not a big deal. Yes, it is, Ms. Jones. We want to take care of your carpet. And you think about what that does to the customer. It's a huge difference. Okay? Get your techs certified. Talk about where to park the vehicles, especially if they leak in oil, put a piece of cardboard under there. Okay? Those little things are what makes the difference when you're talking to a customer and building that relationship. So how they look makes a huge difference. You need to discuss that as a company. Cleaning up daily when you're installing the cabinets, and especially when the work is done. There's a direct relationship in the customer's mind between how neat and clean you leave the area and the quality of work that you do. You can be the best cabinet installer in the country, and you leave a mess when you leave, and guess what? Their perception of you is, okay. And you can be a really good cabinet maker, or maybe not even the best out there, but you clean up afterwards, you vacuum afterwards, you make it look sharp when you leave. Their perception of you and your company is totally different than that. It makes a difference, makes a huge difference. Ringer days. We're always looking for add-on sales. Now, you may or may not be able to adapt this into your particular company. This happened to be a chimney sweep I'm going to talk about here, but I want you to get the concept again. Now, this particular company wanted to increase add-on sales. When they're out there cleaning somebody's chimney, they could do lots of things like waterproof it, put a cap on top, et cetera, et cetera. There's 5 or 6 different things they could do. So they decided they were going to create a thing called ringer days. And a ringer day was any particular day that that technician sold $1,500 or more add-on sales that particular day. And if they sold $1,500 or more that particular day, they had individual calendars for each technician, and they circled that, and that was a ringer day. Okay. At the end of the year, any technician who had 8 ringer days for the entire year for the entire year. Got an all-expense paid trip to Hawaii with their spouse. Okay? And you know what? Over half that company's techs went every single year. Now, what's the point? Some days they only sold 200 doors. Sometimes it was only 500, but they're always thinking about how can we have add-on sales in the middle of the situation we're in, if it's possible. Now, I know this is a little different industry that may or may not apply to you, but it has some concepts that might be of value. Okay? Gift after a major installation. How many of you give the customer a gift after the major installation? Half a dozen of you. Okay? Build $25, $50 into your price. When a customer spent $5, $10, $15, $20, $50,000 with your company, say thank you. Get them a gift certificate to a local restaurant, maybe a gift basket or something. But after the job's done, send them a letter, send something out there and say, thank you, we appreciate the job. Thank you for giving us that work. Okay? Now, let me tell you something. If you ever start that program, don't quit. Because I promise you, Mr. and Ms. Jones had that free gift to their local restaurant or whatever it happens to be. They're going to tell their friends about it, and they're expecting one as well. And if you stop it, it becomes a negative thing. Okay? But show some appreciation to the customer in the middle of the process. They can pay for it, put it in the bid, that's fine. But get it covered. A real great process you can use for that is an online program called Send Out Cards. It's a really neat program. You can choose from over 10,000 cards, but what most contractors who use a program do this, they take a picture afterwards of the work they've done. You can take pictures of the cabinets in there. And then send them a thank you card that says, hey, we appreciate the opportunity to work with you. And along with that, online, you can send anything from cookies, you can send a book, you can send a gift card, you can do hundreds and hundreds of different things on there. And all you have to do is, in the office, put it in there, and it's automatically sent for you. It's a different way to say thank you. Pay for referrals. Okay? I want to encourage you to pay for referrals from other people. I had a friend of mine who does fire restoration in Owensboro, Kentucky. Several years ago, there was an elderly lady across the street from us had a kitchen fire. And I called Leo and said, hey, Leo, I just wanted to let you know that the lady across the street had a kitchen fire. You might want to contact her. That was it. Okay? 2 or 3 days later, I noticed his trucks showed up in front of her house. He was over there for 2 or 3 days. Obviously, he got the job. Okay? After he completed the job, it was probably 3 or 4 days, maybe a week later, I get this letter in the mail from Leo saying, Tom, I really appreciate the lead that you gave us on there. Here's a $50 gift certificate to one of the nicer restaurants in town. You know what I'm doing now? I'm looking for fires everywhere I go. Okay? But literally, encourage behavior you want repeated. Reward behavior you want repeated. That's the principle. Biggest misconception in our industry today, from the technician or employee standpoint, is this. Gee, you're paying me this much money and you're charging the customers humongous amount of money up here. They don't understand why we got to be charging what we're charging. It costs a lot to run a company, as you all know out there. You got rent, utilities, tech wages, matching taxes, vehicles, gasoline, maintenance, office supplies. I don't have to read it all. There's huge cost in running your company called overhead. Okay? That's all got to be covered before you make a dime. 2 things when people are setting hourly rates. And I know I'm saying hourly rates is kind of foreign to some of you because I know you do a lot of pricing linearly. Okay? But when we worked with the company out in California, we decided they really needed to come around the other way. How long does it take you to do the job, and what hourly rate do you need to do that? Because pricing things linearly doesn't tell me, well, I've got 3 drawers here, no drawers here, et cetera, et cetera. It needs to be how long does it take to do the job. Okay. When we're setting those hourly rates, the 2 highest costs of doing business you have are often overlooked. One of them is called equipment replacement costs versus depreciation. Okay. Now, depreciation, from an accounting standpoint, that's what Uncle Sam lets you write off on that piece of equipment you purchased or that vehicle that you have. But it's always dealing with what it cost you 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago. Okay. We talk about equipment replacement costs. We're talking about what it's going to cost you to replace that piece of equipment 2, 3, 5, 10 years in the future, build that future cost in today's pricing so that when you're ready to replace that piece of equipment or that vehicle, you've got the dollars in order to do that. Equipment replacement cost typically is anywhere from 40 to 60% higher than depreciation because we're dealing with future cost, but you're going to have to spend those dollars someday. Okay? And the other one is our cost of non-billable time. Non-billable time is that time that we pay the employee for that we can't charge the customer for. That's running around the shop when they should be over there working. That's travel time when you're out there doing the installation. It's sick, vacation, holidays. When people turn around and they set their hourly rates, the two things they often leave out is the two biggest costs of doing business, which is my equipment replacement cost and my cost of non-billable time. Who pays for those? A customer does. If a customer doesn't pay for everything, you don't get a profit at the end of the day. It's just that simple. Now, even if you make a profit, guess what? You don't get to keep it all. And by the way, profit is not a dirty word. We've been kind of told that, especially from the government. Okay? Everybody in here needs to make a profit. You need to make a significant profit. Why? Because that's what funds the growth of your company. Profit is what you need when receivables goes from here to here. Something's got to cover that. As you grow, your inventory goes from here to here. Something's got to cover that. Okay? When you decide to expand or grow into a new area or a new location, something's got to fund that growth. Well, that's what profit does. It's absolutely essential that you put profit into your pricing. It's foundational. Okay? Now, sometimes you get through that whole process and you see what happened, and you look at that hourly rate I've got to charge to put that piece of that cabinet together, and it seems it's unusually high. I mean, how are we going to do that? Okay? When you find out what you need to charge, charge it. Going right back to our initial talk this morning, you do quality work, you do what you said you're going to do, when you said you're going to do it, price literally won't be on the list. But there's always a fear factor of raising your rate. Happens to everybody out here. Okay? I want to talk about that a little bit. I've been doing business training now, as our company has, for over 33 years across the country, every trade out there. Initially, we would have a program on labor pricing, setting your properly rates. We had another full-day program on cash flow. Usually the people who came to the second program on cash flow were the same ones that were in the first program. So I always ask them, everybody who came back, I said, how many people raised your rates since last time you were here? Almost everybody in the room will have raised them. Some $1 or $2 an hour, some $5, some $15 or $20 an hour. And I always ask a second question. When you raised your hourly rate, how many of you had a problem with your customer? You know what? I've had a single contractor turn around and say, I raised my rates and my customers went 15 different directions. It doesn't happen. We think it will, but it doesn't. Okay? Again, if you do those three basic things. A little story about my painter to illustrate the point. Several years ago, we needed some painting done at our house. Now, I don't know about where you live, but in Owensboro, Kentucky, where I live, it's hard to find a painter that's not on drugs or alcohol or some other problem. Okay? We've been looking for months trying to find somebody to do quality work at our house because we had a lot of painting that needed to be done. Okay? And we were looking and looking and looking, haven't been able to find anybody. And I was talking to a friend of mine one night, explaining the situation. He said, well, I got a young man over at my house right now. He's doing a great job. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. I said, when he's through at your house, send him over to my house. I said, okay. So 3 or 4 weeks later, the guy shows up at my front door. I said, I understand you want painting done? I said, yes, go ahead. He'd worked for a couple of days. And then I came home, I guess it was the third day he was there, and I said, you know what? We never really did discuss how much you're going to charge me. I said, how much are you going to charge me for this painting? He kind of puffed up a little bit. He was a young man. He said, I'm going to charge you $15 an hour. I almost laughed in his face. I said, there's no way you can make a living at $15 an hour. It's impossible. He said, yes, I can. I used to work for a big paint company. I went on my own a few months ago. I don't have any overhead. I can charge $15 an hour and make a nice profit. I said, no, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. No, you can't. We argue back and forth. I said, I'll tell you what. If you'll do this, I'll do this. He said, tomorrow, skip lunch. I'll skip lunch. I'll come to the house, and we're going to take you through a full-day labor pricing seminar in about an hour. And we're going to figure out what you need to charge, just real quick and dirty. So would you do that? And he said, well, I'll do it, but I'm not raising my rates because people won't pay more than $15 an hour. I said, they will. You do great quality work. So I came in the next day. I mean, he was literally sitting at the dining room table. So I started asking him a few questions. I said, now my wife said that you didn't show up till 9 o'clock in the morning the last 3 days, and you left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, yeah. He said, I'm divorced, I got 3 kids, I got to take my kids to work by the time, or to school. By the time I do that, go by the paint house, pick up my supplies, get to your house, it's usually about 9 o'clock. I said, okay. And I said, and you leave at 3? He said, I got to leave at 3 because I got to pick up my kids. I said, oh, okay. And she also said at lunchtime you didn't just eat a sandwich, you took a full hour. I said, yeah, I did. So you get here at 9, you leave at 12, and you come back, yeah. Okay. I said, you plan on taking any vacation or holiday? I'm going to take 2 weeks of vacation this year for sure, and all the holidays. Well, and real quick, know what his non-billable time is, okay? So we sketched that out real quick. It's a pretty good sized number. And I said, what about your vehicle? And he kind of hung his head like this, and he said, you know what? It's really pretty shot. I need to buy another one. So he put in some money for equipment replacement on there. And finally, he admitted he did have some overhead costs. He said, I do have some maintenance on my vehicle. I've got some gasoline. I do have some insurance. So I got a little bit overhead, so we threw that in there as well. We figured out his break-even rate. Okay? His break-even rate was $15 an hour. He needed to be charging $30 an hour. Oh, by the way, the last thing I asked him is, how much money do you want to make? He said, I want to make $25,000 a year. I said, even in Kentucky, you can't raise 3 kids on $25,000. It's impossible. I said, yes, I can. No, I can't. Yes, okay, okay. We put in $25,000. When it was all said and done, we found out he needed to be charging $30 an hour just to be able to make $25,000 a year. He said, customers won't pay that. I said, yes, they will. You do great quality work. I said, you got anybody you need to do a bid on the next few days? And he said, yeah, I got 2 tonight. I said, okay, promise me this. You'll bid both of them at $30 an hour and see what happens. I can't do that. I need the work. Just do it. We first argued a little bit. He said, okay, I'll do those 2, but that's it. I said, all right. So he said, 2 or 3 days later, I saw him. He was still working at the house. And I said, did you go on those 2 jobs the other night? And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, what happened? He said, I went to the first house, and it was a huge house. They wanted me to paint the whole inside of the house. I mean, it was going to take me several weeks to do the job. And he said, I figured all my costs, or my time out there, I figured it at $30 an hour. I looked at that price, and I thought, there's absolutely no way they're going to pay this. Either they're just going to slam the door in my face, or they're going to say, you got to lower your price if you want this job. So, but I promised you I'd do it, 2 jobs at $30 an hour, so I did. I bid it to him, and I handed it to him, kind of shaking along the way. I said, what happened? They said, when can you start? So you didn't argue about the price, didn't even mention the price. He said, just, when can you start? So, really? Okay. I said, what happened on the second call? He said, I went to the second house. He said, it was the crabbiest old lady you've ever want to meet. I mean, it's one of those people, you walk through the front door, she's complaining about everything. I decided 5 minutes in the conversation I didn't want to work for her. So when I put her bid package together, I bid it at $45 an hour. I said, what happened? He said, I got that job too. But I have seen him multiple times over the last several years. Now he's charging about $50 an hour. He's got 2 other guys working with him. He's doing just fine. But his perception was the customer won't pay that, and they will. We talk about raising your rates. One last thing to look at right here. Let's assume you've calculated your needed hourly rate, and it's $85 an hour. Okay? And then you call over town and find out what everybody else is charging. Well, the lowest guy in town is at $35 an hour, and the highest one in town is $125 an hour. So my objective, I'm at 85. I want to get at least within 10% of the highest guy in town. Now, I have no problem being the highest. I think you get a certain clientele that way. But let's just say we want to get within 10% of the highest one. So getting within 10% of the highest one means I need to take my $85 rate, and I need to increase it $27.50 an hour to get to that point. Now, if I'm on time and material, that's going to be a real challenge. So we're going to take our $27.50 and we're going to divide it by 4. That's $6.88 an hour. And then every 6 months, we're going to raise our hourly rate $6.88. So within 2 years, we'll be up to where we really want to be. Okay? Now, let's say I've got 3 technicians. We're making $85 an hour. We make a 10% profit right now. That's $8.50 an hour. If we work 1,000 hours a year for each guy, that means those 3 guys are bringing in $25,500 profit for the company. Now I take my first jump, not the second, third, or fourth, my first jump, and increase my rate $6.88 an hour. That means my new rate is 91.88. My new profit margin, rather than being 8.50, is now 15.38. When I take my first increase, that takes my profitability from $25,000 to over $46,000. And this is the kicker in it. If you do the math and you raised your rate and you lost a full 30% of your entire customer base, 30% of the people who used to work with you say, I'm not working with you anymore. You still, if you do the math, you still made $800 more than you would have otherwise. Now, when you raise your rate, are you going to lose 30% of your customer base? Absolutely not. Okay? So again, what's the point? Find out what you got to charge, and that's the foundation stone, and charge it. Okay? So, take your eyes off the economy and your competition. Remember, what your customer wants is quality work. Do what you said you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. Remember the lessons that we learned from Roger the plumber. Apply each one of those to your job, to your company. Find out what makes you unique and market it, and price for profit. Okay? Now, one last thing. In a lot of ways, this is the most important thing I'm going to say all day long. When I was a little boy, my favorite program on TV was Wide World of Sports. My favorite program for the entire year was the Surfing Championships from Hawaii. And I remember sitting there in my living room watching that thing on TV, and I'm sitting in a chair, and I've got white knuckles. And I'm watching that 60-foot wave come over like that, and I'm watching this little bitty surfer down here, and I'm thinking, man, I hope he doesn't slip. Because if he does, he may never surface again. Okay? Well, you've been here for a day, and you're going to be here another day, and you're going to learn lots of stuff. And chances are, every session you go to, you made a little note there that says, you know what, I really need to do this. And you went to the next one, I really need to do that. And maybe you picked up something in my session. You do this and this too. And pretty soon you're like that little surfer. I got to do all these things, and if I don't do all that, I'm going to go out of business. And there's a certain truth to that. But in the midst of it, keep your priorities in order. Keep your priorities in order. There's a little poem. Most of you heard it before. I modified it just a little bit, and it goes like this. 100 years from today, it won't matter how much money you made. It won't matter what kind of house you lived in. It won't matter what kind of car you drove. The only thing that's going to make a difference 100 years from today is how much love you sowed into your spouse, into your kids, even your neighbors and your customers. That's what changes lives from generation to generation. When I first went into business back in 1987, an individual handed me a pamphlet that's still available on the internet today, and it's called The Tyranny of the Urgent. The Tyranny of the Urgent. And in that little pamphlet, it talks about the urgent things of life, and it talks about the important things of life. And what it said is this. The urgent things of life absolutely scream for your time. They scream for your time. And the really, really important things of life, you know what happens to them? They just kind of sit here and wait for you to make time for them. They won't say a word. They'll just wait for you to make time for them. Now, most of you, when you go back to the office, you're going to have been gone a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4. Maybe you're taking extra time, maybe a week. When you walk through that front door, when you get back, what's going to hit you? Urgent. Do you know why you were gone? The materials didn't get there. We didn't finish the quote. My computer crashed, and I quit. Urgent. But you're going to learn a lot of stuff this weekend, and we really should do some of those things because they're really important. But if you don't make time for them, it's not going to happen. Now, this same principle of the urgent and the important carries over to our personal lives as well. I'm talking primarily to the guys in the room right now. A lot of guys, when they go home at the end of a long day, you know what's important to them? Let's go have a beer with my buddy. I want to watch this on TV. I want to go do that. I want to do that. You know what's really, really, really important at the end of a long day? Sit down and talk to your spouse for a while. Go to Billy's ball game. Go to Susie's recital, even though you hate piano. You know why? Those years are going to pass, and they're going to pass quickly. I can't tell you the number of contractors I've run into in every trade across this country and in Canada over the last 33 years who have literally spent an entire lifetime. I don't mean part of it. I mean an entire lifetime building a successful business. And they've done it. I mean, they're written up in the trade journals. They got the plaques on the wall. But you know what? Most of them, not all of them, most of them, it's cost them something. A lot of them, it's cost them their health. Many of them, it's cost them their spouse. And almost all of them, it's cost them those years when their kids were growing up and, gee, I was going to go to your ball game, but I had to work over this afternoon. And I know we were going to go on vacation week after next. I didn't expect this next job to come in that quickly. We're going to have to postpone it next year. And pretty soon, they're gone. They're gone. I don't know a single person who's ever been on their deathbed, not one, who looked up at the person in front of them and said, you know what? Sure wish I'd spent more time at the office. Doesn't happen. Now, I'm not saying go home at 2 o'clock every afternoon and play with the kids. What I am saying is this: keep a balance between your life, okay, in your life. Most of us went into business for one reason and one reason only. We went into business because we wanted to make provision for our family. But if we're not really, really, really careful, you know what happens? Our business becomes our life. It's not. It's a big part of your life, but it's not your entire life. Keep a balance between that and family, okay? One last thing, each of you have a sheet somewhere within your reach, looks like this. These are the 4 most popular business building tools we offer. There's one on labor pricing, models your company by department, sets hourly rates, creates cash flow budgets, lets you go through the what-if process. That's available. We have a DVD called Why Do We Need to Charge So Much? If your employees, especially in the sales end of it, don't understand why you're charging what you're charging, they'll tend to underprice the customer. This walks you through a process with them. There's a 96-page company policy in Microsoft Word. You can literally just read through it, cut, change, whatever you want, push the button, you got a 96-page company policy manual, and there's a CD set on Service Manager University. That whole thing goes for a little over $1,000. If you're interested, it's $499.95, basically the price of the software. And we also do a lot of one-on-one company overviews like we did in the guy in California. Figure out what you need to be charging per hour to make the profits you'd like to have. Set a financial business plan together for the next year. That takes 2 days to put that together. If you have any interest in that, just check it off on that little sheet, put your contact information, and I'll follow up with a call over the next several days. Appreciate you being here. Going to get out a little bit early, so hopefully you can get to your place where you need to be. Thank you for spending your time with me this morning. Amen.
Real quick, we have a couple of minutes if anyone has any really important questions to ask Tom right now. All right, thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.